Stick around, more to come, including a look at traveling conditions. That's all coming up next following your local forecast. This tropical update this go around will feature Tropical Storm Bonnie, downgraded from a hurricane status at 11 o'clock this morning, and the coordinates at that time were 35.2 degrees north, 76.8 degrees west, or about 80 miles to the southwest of Elizabeth City in North Carolina. Top sustained winds down below hurricane status, so it's now a tropical storm. They were at 65 miles per hour, gusting better than that at times, however. Still crawling along northeasterly bound at 6 miles per hour. And the pressure's on the rise, which means we do have a weakening tropical storm at 978 millibars. Let's show you the latest warnings out right now. And once again, we do have tropical storm warnings, which are out. Forget about the hurricane advisories right now. They are gone. We will show you this, which is, once again, a tornado watch in effect until 5 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time. Covers still a large part of northeastern North Carolina and also much of southeastern Virginia, including around Norfolk, Virginia, where you could be looking at some nasty weather almost certainly now as Tropical Storm Bonnie begins to churn its way northward very, very slowly. Let's show you what it looks like on the radar picture at the present time. The center of circulation not entirely over land at the present time, which means this is going to be a slow process to really weaken. It will not weaken very rapidly, that is for sure. So many places which have seen more than 10 inches of rainfall could see another 5 to 10 inches of rainfall, especially in east central and northeastern sections of North Carolina until later on this evening and by early morning tomorrow. And some of that heavy rainfall begins to shift down northbound towards Elizabeth City in North Carolina and Norfolk, Virginia come later on this afternoon. This is what happened so far up until 8 o'clock this morning. Take a look at some of the deeper reds in here, which indicates anywhere between 6 and about 10 inches of rainfall. Since that time, even more has fallen, and because of the slow nature of this storm beginning to move its way northward, we're going to be looking at torrential amounts of rainfall still in the offing. Additionally, could be looking at another 8 inches or better than that through later this afternoon. Well, there's something else we have to worry about as well. That's going to be Hurricane Danielle. The 11 o'clock advisory Eastern Daylight Time, 21.4 degrees north, 59.3 degrees west, or about 300 miles to the northeast of the northern Leeward Islands. Top sustained winds with Danielle back up to 90 miles per hour. It was moving west-northwesterly at 18 miles per hour, so still cruising along at a pretty healthy speed, and the pressure again was holding at 997 millibars. Now, long-range computer projections do indicate that we're going to be looking at a trough developing over the eastern part of the country during the next 2 or 3 days, with a ridge developing over the west, which could mean some good news if you live along the East Coast, because that may, just may, help to deflect and steer Danielle as it gets closer to the United States, more off to the north and eventually to the northeast, and may only scrape the United States at the very, very worst. Too early to tell right now. Once again, we'll have to keep our eyes on this one for sure for the next 2, 3, or 4 days. This is a look at Danielle right now. not all that well organized, but getting better organized as time goes along. Indicated where it did undergo a lot of shear during the last 24 hours. That is now beginning to lessen, so we should be looking at a more of a developing system during the next 24 hours. More on this coming up next.
All this atmospheric energy coming together.
Drama, passion, suspense, tropospheric undulations. Every night on Weather Center PM.
When Hurricane Fran hit down here, it pretty much destroyed the Carolina coastline. We work in a marina. We were so busy helping our customers get their boats out of the water that we didn't have time to board up our house.
We've got a lot of windows in this house.
We went over to Lowe's and it was very late. Brian, the manager, let us in and helped us get all the supplies that we needed to board up our house. He was a real lifesaver.
And house saver too.
Thanks, Lowe's, and thanks to Brian.
Glad we can help you.
It's been downgraded from a hurricane to a tropical storm, but Bonnie is still making things tough for you in eastern North Carolina. As these scenes from Morehead City show, the biggest threat now is flooding as the slow-moving storm continues to drop heavy rain in the area. These pictures from Wilmington, North Carolina show the toll Bonnie took there. Homes and businesses were damaged by strong winds and flooding. Trees and power lines were knocked down. Hundreds of people had to leave their homes for shelters. The good news is that no one was injured. And good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at the Weather Channel. For this edition of Weather Center, I'm Dan Atkinson in the Forecast Center, where we continue to monitor the slow movement of what is now Tropical Storm Bonnie. And we want to show you, by way of satellite view, a cloud swirl associated with this weakening system, but it still packs quite a punch in terms of the threat of flooding. And the latest word from the National Hurricane Center, actually updating the figures that you see here. A tropical storm warning is in effect for New River Inlet, North Carolina, to Cape Henlopen, Delaware, including Pamlico Sound, Albemarle Sound, and Chesapeake Bay, southward from Smith Point. Tropical Storm Watch is in effect from Cape Henlopen to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, including Delaware Bay, and could be upgraded to a tropical storm warning later today. And a Tropical Storm Watch is also in effect for Chesapeake Bay from Smith Point to Drum Point, and for the Potomac River from Cobb Point to Smith Point. We do have the latest coordinates placing the center of Tropical Storm Bonnie about 60 miles west of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, or about 70 miles south-southwest of Elizabeth City, New Jersey. And standing by now, and right in the brunt of the storm, is Jim Cantori, who is at, let me see, Jim is at Morehead City, North Carolina. And Jim, can we hear from you? Are you able to communicate with us?
I'll tell you right now, we continue to just get battered away. You know, just when you think Bonnie's going to wind down just a little bit, this thing just cranks up again, and we continue to get strong winds gusting well over tropical storm force. Now, the rainfall has been pretty heavy recently, and we've probably gotten a couple inches of rain at least in the last hour and a half, so we've had some pretty good rain come in off the ocean. Also, I just talked to emergency management here in Carteret County, and they talked about 90% of the homes now without power. 90%, so it's even come up since this morning. But the good news is, with this lull, so to speak, the road crews have been out and they are starting to do some repairs. Also, the DOT has been out because there is debris on some of the main thoroughfares. Low-lying flooding has also been a problem here, and this is really the picture, folks, across all of eastern North Carolina. Now, across the barrier island, we don't have many reports, but there are reports of some erosion and also some overwash. So that could make for some miserable pictures, I think, once this thing clears on out. Let's go ahead and show you our storm cam shot, and you can see here how the wind is continuing to blow the trees around, and it just doesn't seem to want to let up. So until it does, we're just going to continue to get pounded here in Morehead City, North Carolina. Dan, it's not easy to stand out here, man, but we'll do the best we can. Back to you.
You'll never forget this, Jim, and we thank you.
Oh, you got that right.
Appreciate your insight there, and we'll check back with you later on. And the brunt of Bonnie's fury has been felt further north in Nags Head, North Carolina. Here's a look at what's been happening there. Although the strength of the storm is weakening, it's still kicking up a pretty mean surf, and you can expect the winds and the rain to pick up there as the day continues and as Bonnie continues to move on toward the north at near 6 miles per hour, toward the northeast, I should say, at near 6 miles per hour. And we're joined here in the Forecast Center by Weather Channel hurricane expert Dr. Steve Lyons. And Dr. Steve, this system is ultimately going to pick up speed, but for now this slow movement is really causing some problems.
That's right, it sure is. It's the winds don't go away. That means the storm surge at the coast is up. It means the waves are up. It means the rain over the land is still there, and there's potential for flooding. So slow-moving tropical cyclones over land are never a good thing.
Earlier, just at the beginning of Weather Center, we saw some damage video from Wilmington, North Carolina. And the damage there, would you say, was more related to the water and the battering or to winds?
It's hard to say. It looked like some of the roofs were taken off, maybe by the wind, but it looked also like quite a bit of water and storm surge damage there associated with the waves and the surge. I'm sure once we get an inspection down there going and see what's actually happened, but it looks like that area was the most hard hit from what I've seen so far.
And the storm is weakening, but it still has effects far felt. We might show how at this point there are heavy surf advisories in effect all the way down to Jupiter Inlet, Florida, up to Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, and of course heavy surf obviously within the tropical storm warning area, all the way up toward Merrimack River, New Hampshire. Possibly some heavy surf to deal with there.
That's right. One reason the circulation is still maintaining itself so well is because half of it is over the water. And the half that's over the water is still generating some surf out in here that'll continue all the way up the East Coast. Some of it will, of course, also get to New Jersey as well, and New York, and then on up into New Hampshire. So anybody near the beach there should be aware of the oncoming surf.
And people in northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia should be prepared for possible tornadoes too, shouldn't they?
They sure should. Anytime you've got a tropical cyclone over land, severe weather is always possible within isolated, rapidly moving thunderstorms.
And this system is producing plenty of rain, as we see on radar.
Circulation center is roughly here. You can see the circulation is like this in toward the center, but way out in here the bands are coming around. And up here, Jeff is located here, and of course the surf is moving along the shore there, producing a very strong longshore current, and erosion is going to be significant along the North Carolina coast here, as well as it was down here to the south and southwest side of North Carolina.
Well, we've seen, Dr. Steve, some impressive rainfall totals, and we have a list of those here, starting with Jacksonville, North Carolina, better than 11 inches. Wilmington picked up so far, as of 11 this morning, better than 9 1/3 inches. A lot of flooded areas now as a consequence of that rain.
That is correct, and actually, believe it or not, they can consider themselves lucky relative to rainfall, because a more typical hurricane will produce much more high rain rates than what we are seeing right now. The rain rates have been relatively low. Typically we see 1 to 3 inches. They're looking more like anywhere from 1/3 to 1 inch at the most. So that's a very positive thing, even though the thing's moving very slow, and it can still have the potential to put another 6 to 10 inches around the state before it gets out of there.
Well, speaking of getting out of there, the direction it may take in getting out of there, let's show what the possible track for Tropical Storm Bonnie would be.
Okay, you can see over the hurricanes is currently the position is roughly in there and a little bit farther to the east, and the Hurricane Center has it generally coming up into this area, then accelerating off to the east. However, of course, there's always air in the track, and if it takes this track, we could have significant storm surge all the way up the coast. Of course, remember, it's not going to be hurricane-related storm surge; it would be tropical storm-related. If it takes the track more out in here, everybody would be better off. Although, if it takes the track closer to the coast, they also have the high rain potential, because it's not going to be moving too fast, although it should be accelerating as it moves off to the northeast.
Well, good news there. Of course, there is Hurricane Danielle out in the Atlantic. Let's take a quick look at where it is.
That's right. You can see the statistics there. It's out in the central Atlantic, continues to move to the west-northwest at about 18 miles an hour. That's a little bit of a slowdown, but the track is generally should continue out into this general area, so the southeast U.S. should be keeping their eyes on Danielle as well as time goes on.
Good advice. Thanks a lot, Dr. Steve Lyons, hurricane expert here at the Weather Channel. We'll check back and hope you'll check in to our Weather Channel online service, weather.com, if you happen to be away from your TV set. And now for the latest on what's happening elsewhere across the country, here's Janetta Jones in the studio.
All right, thanks, Dan. We are watching showers and thunder showers here in Minnesota as well as Iowa. That possibility of heavy downpours is definitely in place. We could see some rains moving on towards, you got it, Green Bay, Milwaukee, maybe even Chicagoland by later on this afternoon, as that trough is going to be inching its way more towards the east, and the moisture feed is still coming in out of the Gulf of Mexico. So that's something we're going to have to watch very closely. As we zoom in a little bit, you can see the rain refiring here back towards North Platte, but the showers and thunder showers still affecting folks along I-35 on into Des Moines, Iowa, and not so much in Kansas City, but east of Kansas City as you head on into Columbia or even Quincy, Illinois, and Dubuque. That's where we're seeing most of the rainfall. This is the way things stand. We have our low, we have our frontal boundary, and of course the moisture heading in out of the Gulf of Mexico. So this is what we're going to be focusing in on, in addition to what is happening, obviously our top story here in North Carolina and Virginia with the heavy rain and the high surf and all of that.
Here, you're safe, out of harm's way.
Summer, a time for traveling, a time for long drives. This summer, the heat's up on Stars, with some of Hollywood's hottest stars in some of the coolest movies.
Yeah.
If you have Stars, you've already seen some of the big movies we have to offer.
Good call!
But you haven't seen anything yet. So tune into Stars all summer for the coolest movies on the hottest channel.
To order, call Comcast today.
Really big deals are at Mrs. G's on washers, dryers, VCRs, big screen TVs, CD players, refrigerators, microwaves, and much more at unmatched savings.
How do we do it?
With unmatched buying power on over 48 brand names.
We must make room. We're remodeling, and we must sell off floor samples and inventory. Huge price reductions. Buy now and save.
So the next time you think of appliances or electronics, remember,
the big deals are at Mrs. G's.
1 block south of the junction of 295 and 95 on Route 1 in Lawrenceville.
I'm sure other kids were interested in weather, but I was a real fanatic about it. Now I look at the winds on a computer, and I tell people about it. The best part? I get to watch the wind for a living.
Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
As we focus this storm watch on what's going on in the tropics, once again, the big story in the last several days continues to be Bonnie. And Bonnie, now a tropical storm, continuing to buffer along the eastern seaboard of North Carolina. You can see the characteristic counterclockwise twist in the clouds wrapping around North Carolina, fanning up through New Jersey, all the way back down into areas of southern South Carolina. If you've been plotting along with us, make sure you write down 35.5 north, 76.3 west, and you will have the most current update as of 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Moving northeast at 6. That's good to see it heading back out towards the sea as a central pressure now 28.94. Check your home barometer, see what an impact of a deep low pressure that is. It is tropical storm status, down to 65 mile an hour winds, but still with the steady rains in that area and the wind speeds up to that mark, we could see some more uprooting of trees, snapping of tree limbs, and down power lines. So be extra careful. Make sure you take the advice of local officials before there's any return from previously evacuated areas. Little River Inlet, North Carolina, extending all the way up into Cape Henlopen, we continue with tropical storm warnings, meaning that area can experience tropical storm force winds and, of course, churning up at the ocean all along the eastern seaboard under heavy surf advisories. Look at the radar picture. Obvious where the center or the low pressure is, right in here. A lot of bands of precipitation still wrapping around. Danielle continues to move on off towards the west-northwest. Around the periphery of a high, we'll continue to guide it westward. We think it'll start to turn northwest and eventually north into the future. Here's the very latest satellite perspective. Should pass well of the Leeward Islands as well as Puerto Rico.
I'm Jeff Morrow in Nags Head, North Carolina on the Outer Banks. Tropical Storm Bonnie now bringing its fury to this area. We'll have a live report next on Weather Center.
When Hurricane Fran hit down here, it pretty much destroyed the Carolina coastline. We work in a marina. We were so busy helping our customers get their boats out of the water that we didn't have time to board up our house.
We've got a lot of windows in this house.
We went over to Lowe's and it was very late. Brian, the manager, let us in and helped us get all the supplies that we needed to board up our house. He was a real lifesaver.
And house saver, too.
Thanks, Lowe's, and thanks to Brian.
Glad we can help you.
There are some people who prefer to be left in the dark. But if you prefer the light, you need a Honda generator. They're easy to start, efficient, and quiet. But best of all, they're reliable.
Honda. That thing always work. Always.
Honda generators are available at a dealer near you.
While Bonnie has been downgraded from a hurricane to a tropical storm, it continues to cause problems across eastern portions of North Carolina. You're looking at live pictures from Morehead City. It's just one of the places affected by Bonnie. Another place that felt Bonnie's wrath, Wilmington, North Carolina. Strong winds and flooding have damaged homes and businesses. Hundreds of thousands of people are without power. And today, President Clinton declared North Carolina a disaster area. We have team coverage of this event. Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Weather Center. I'm Dan Atkinson, and here in the Weather Channel Forecast Center, we continue to monitor the slow movement, actually the slowly increasing speed, fortunately, of Tropical Storm Bonnie. It has been very sluggish to move across coastal sections of eastern North Carolina, and as a result of that slow movement, it has produced some significant rainfall totals, as we'll be seeing. But as expected, the tropical storm is now beginning to increase its forward speed. Good news for those who've been battered by this tropical storm, and we will be giving you a sample of what's happening even now along the coast in just a moment. First off, though, let's take a look at the current satellite view and the latest coordinates. And we put the satellite into motion. And we also want to give you the latest information from the 3 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. The 3 p.m. coordinates would place the center of Tropical Storm Bonnie about latitude 35.7 north, longitude 76.1 west. That would be a point about 40 miles to the south of Elizabeth City, North Carolina. What you see here would be the 2 p.m. information, not yet updated, but you do see the general path of the storm over these recent days. The position, the center, is also about 45 miles northwest of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Maximum sustained winds are at this time near 65 miles per hour still, with higher gusts. And the estimated central pressure about 981 millibars, or 28.97 inches. Again, the tropical storm has picked up speed a little bit, moving now at 8 miles per hour instead of 6 miles per hour. And along the coast of North Carolina, we have standing by at both Nags Head and at Morehead City. The Weather Channel's Jeff Morrow first off at Nags Head, and Jim Cantori is standing by at Morehead City. Jim, what's happening where you are?
Hey, Dan, believe it or not, you may not believe this, but things have actually improved here a little bit. The raindrops have gotten very, very small, so it's almost like a heavy mist or if you will, a heavier light rain. We've also seen the winds drop considerably below tropical storm force, and they really just occasionally gusts of tropical storm force. So it's really not as bad as it was, but certainly ugly, to say the least. This area really beaten quite hard, I should say, for the last several hours with the rains this morning and the wind. Believe it or not, 90% of the people in Carteret County have lost their power, and I would imagine that number is going to be improving now with this slight improvement in the weather, and that's going to allow the crews to get out and not turn the power on. You can hear the generator at this gentleman's home behind me here as he is having to run some things off of his generator. But notice on our storm cam that we can show you the wind, which is still blowing some of the pine trees off to our west away, and how the water's still coming in with the rain as the winds come in from the southwest. So, you know, I stand here and I'm trying to tell you that, hey, it's a little bit on the ugly or improved side, but I guess the biggest improvement would be sunshine and no wind. Up to the north, where it's gotten a little bit worse in Nags Head, let's go there with Jeff Morrow for a live report. Jeff?
All right, Jim, indeed, as things have calmed down a little bit where you are, they've picked up here at Nags Head on the Outer Banks. We're kind of in between squalls right now, but we have had some wind gusts over 60 miles an hour, I'm sure. Earlier at the Coast Guard station, there were some wind gusts, or Coast Guard report, up to about 50 or 55 miles an hour. Even much stronger winds down at Diamond Shoals Light Tower, which is about 10 to 15 miles off of Cape Hatteras. They had hurricane force gusts here just about an hour and a half ago. So still a little bit of punch, I would say, left in Tropical Storm Bonnie as it continues to increasingly quickly, I guess, make its way on up the coast here. A lot of wind, a lot of rain, most of it blowing sideways, as I'm sure Jim was talking about earlier today and late yesterday. We are on an outgoing tide, which is good news for the overwash potential, but of course that tide will be coming back in as we head toward the 11 o'clock or midnight hour tonight. We'll keep you updated from the Outer Banks. Let's go now back to Dan.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. And Jim will be checking back with you there at Nags Head and at Morehead City as our Weather Channel team coverage continues with Tropical Storm Bonnie, again beginning to move at a little bit greater forward speed. Still a slow-moving storm at 8 miles per hour toward the northeast, but as expected, it has begun an increase in speed, and indications are it will continue that trend and accelerate on into the Atlantic. We are joined here in the Weather Channel Forecast Center by hurricane expert Dr. Steve Lyons. Dr. Lyons, I don't suppose it was any surprise to you to find that increase in forward speed.
Well, we were hoping, we were forecasting that, but you always hope that your forecast comes out, and I hope it continues to move at a pretty good clip off the coast, away from there.
Now, there still are areas, though, which are under the threat, particularly of flooding, and we want to remind people of where the watch and warning areas are. Tropical storm warnings still in effect, as you can see here. They extend from from New River Inlet, North Carolina, to Cape Henlopen, Delaware, including Pamlico Sound, Albemarle Sound, and Chesapeake Bay, southward from Smith Point. A tropical storm watch is in effect from Cape Henlopen to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, including Delaware Bay, and that watch area could be upgraded to a tropical storm warning later today. A tropical storm watch is also in effect for Chesapeake Bay from Smith Point to Drum Point, and for the Potomac River from Cobb Point to Smith Point. Additionally, there are heavy surf advisories in effect and a continuing tornado watch for portions of extreme northeastern South Carolina and southeastern Virginia. You notice southeastern Virginia on this radar is beginning to get some significant rain sweeping in toward Norfolk. Some moderate to heavy rain occasionally coming around on those bands.
Yes, you can see the circulation centers now generally somewhere in this broader area. Winds are sweeping around here and coming in also near Norfolk, and they could get some significant storm surge out of that as the stronger winds come up out of the south. Usually in east wind directions can pile some pretty decent water in there. Luckily, the winds are not going to be anywhere near what they were earlier.
And a quick look at some of the rain that has fallen. Very heavy rainfall rates indicating here, say, from Jacksonville on down to near Wilmington in the range of 10 to 12 inches. And we've seen that from the actual reports. And there will potentially be more rain, but as the storm begins to accelerate in its forward movement, and we'll be looking for the rain to be tapering off.
That's right. Back in here into the central part of North Carolina, I think we're pretty much done with any heavy rain. The general track has been this way, and the forecast is generally up this way and accelerate out to sea south of Boston there. So we're in pretty good shape as long as it stays off the coast, but we could still have some storm surge and decent rain up here off the East Coast, so people should pay attention very closely.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Steve Lyons. We might add that our next go-around will be checking in on Hurricane Danielle again. It's still well out to sea, but many people interested in that. We'll have the latest bottom of the hour, as well as on our tropical update at 10 minutes before the hour. For the latest information on Hurricane Danielle, as well as Tropical Storm Bonnie and weather elsewhere across the country, join us at our Weather Channel online service, weather.com. And now let's turn to the studio and Dennis Smith.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Steve. As we look at, once again, nationwide, in addition to what's going on with Bonnie buffeting the eastern seaboard, we have some showers and thunderstorms pouring across the plains. A lot of sunshine in Texas, back through Southern California, and over much of the western tier of states. Here's what the current map looks like. Quick-moving storm system advancing on eastward, spreading the rains from the plains of Minnesota all the way down through the Show-Me State of Missouri. Once again, the guiding force here is that front pushing up against Bonnie, and will continue to drive it on off towards the northeast. It looks like the forward speed has increased just a little bit. National Digital Radar highlighting the main areas of precipitation from South Florida to the northern plains, dotting on back into Colorado. A closer examination finding some of those rains in association with Tropical Storm Bonnie starting to make it on up into southern areas of Virginia, clipping around Philadelphia, Dover, Delaware, and extending on back into Washington, D.C. and around Baltimore. Expect the rains to continue to increase, as well as the winds, as Bonnie continues to move on northeast. Thunderstorms rumbling over Dade, Broward, and Monroe counties will continue to give South Florida a pretty good soaking as well. General movement here from east to west. Be careful for ponding on the roadways, especially over Alligator Alley. Showers still building up from La Crosse, Wisconsin, sliding on down to Dubuque, Iowa, extending down to Kirksville, Missouri. That may move into Madison later on this afternoon, Chicago this evening, and it looks like even into Springfield, Illinois in the next couple of hours. Temperatures are quite toasty in the plains. Triple digits reported at Phoenix as well as Oklahoma City.